been now over a decade since AMD released the monster code R9 290X, the top-of-the-line Radeon card meant to compete with Nvidia's higher-end 700 Kepler cards. 10 years later, a lot of things have changed in the GPU market. GCN cards lost their driver support, the X12 became the standard for gaming in the past few years, so the question is, can this aging flagship perform reasonably well in newer titles? It's certainly equipped well enough to be considered even in 2023. 4 GB of VRAM and a massive 512-bit memory bus, and a TDP, which isn't really that uncommon nowadays. When compared to modern-day flagship monsters, the TDP isn't really that high, but back in the day, this was the highest power consumption on a single GPU. One particular thing you certainly have noticed so far is the cooling of the R9 290X that I have, which to say the least is at an impressive level. And as you'll see, will provide excellent thermals for such a high TDP GPU. So with some technical and historical terms out of the way, let's move on to the main topic of today's video. Starting with one of the most demanding games of the decade so far, Cyberpunk 2077 delivers some decent FPS with the 290X at a respectable medium quality preset. While driving around the city, once you get out on foot, the FPS goes even higher, touching the 50s mark from time to time. I must admit, this was an excellently unexpected result from the 2013 flagship. Moving on to a more recent title, Elden Ring will run at a high preset just above 30 FPS. So this is the actual limit that the R9 290X can go in this game, in terms of visual quality. Personally, I would choose a lower preset, like medium. Being on the edge of 30 isn't for you. This was just for the demonstration of the power of the 290X. And as you can see, even under very stressful circumstances, the card can do well enough. We certainly know that the original Witcher 3 will run absolutely fine on this GPU, as will the Remastered edition. There are some higher presets than this in the game as well. Didn't really see a massive difference other than the big sacrifice in FPS, for a not so apparent visual improvement. So the high preset is the way to go here. Another graphically older enhanced title is the Resident Evil 4 Remake, a pretty demanding game as well. That being said, despite the demanding nature of the game, the R9 handles it very well. I turned all the settings down to low for easier benchmarking. There's certainly room to improve the visual quality and still get some decent FPS. Moving on to Dying Light 2, the game will run at a high preset, with frame rates between 30 and 40 most of the time, even when the action heats up. So far, the R9 290X didn't really disappoint, neither graphically or performance-wise. The demanding nature of this level in Uncharted 4 really shows once you enter crowded areas. As usual with this game, the FPS depends on a lot of things, especially the level you're at. As you can see, once you leave dense crowds, the FPS shoots up to over 60 and will vary a lot throughout the game. Atomic Heart works quite well on a lot of cards, and the 290X is no exception, running at the high preset, delivering FPS around the 40s. Really not bad for a 10-year-old GPU. Just for fun, I tested the Mafia Remake as well. There's really a lot of remakes and remasters these days for sure. As you can see, the card has no problem running the game at the absolute highest preset, with a stable frame rate across the whole benchmark. Ultimately, the 290X isn't really such a bad card after a long time since the original release, running some very demanding recent titles at quite respectable FPS and visual quality. The titles I tested aren't really all on the cutting edge when it comes to relevance and requirements nowadays. They are certainly not easy titles to run, especially for a flagship like this, without driver support. As new titles come out, the 290X will certainly become less and less good. After a full decade since release, it's not doing that bad at all. The thing is just that for the money this card sells for, you can get an RX 580 that will do a similar job, if not a better one, while having the latest drivers and using 2 times less power. At the end, would I recommend the R9 290X? Not really. Just get the RX 580 in good condition and you are set for 1080p gaming for now. It's just nice to see an old flagship like this still fighting after a long time, and with coolers like these, the card is a unique one for sure. Thanks for joining me on a beast review of this one's top-of-the-line GPU. Subscribe to not miss out on some upcoming pretty interesting GPU reviews of the past.